Hello, my name is Danae, and I'm an adult patient with classical homocystinuria and the Executive Director of HCU Network America. On behalf of HCU Network America and HCU Network Australia, we are excited to announce the launch of our Homocystinuria Data Collection Program with RareX. You'll be hearing about them more here in a little bit. Classical homocystinuria was first described in 1962, and in 1969, the first of the remethylation disorders, cobalamin C, was first described. Despite homocystinuria now having been described over 60 years, there has only been one FDA-approved drug, and that was 25 years ago. For new therapies to come to market, patient and caregivers need to be engaged in participating in research opportunities. While not everyone can participate in the natural history studies going on due to time, distance, and so forth, everyone who has an internet connection and reads and writes in English will have the opportunity to contribute to the research with the RareX platform, helping fill the decades gap in our community's natural history study data. Our goals of building the Homocystinuria Data Collection Program are to, 1, inform researchers how homocystinuria impacts patients and changes over time. 2, enable better data to use in drug development and clinical trials. 3, give patients the opportunity to participate in clinical trials. 4, reduce the time it takes to study new medicines. 5, accelerate the time to get treatments to patients, and also to enable the use of data as placebo in clinical trial. Also, one thing that we don't have officially is, as a patient who has officially outlived what the data has suggested is the patient expectation of age, I look forward to being able to contribute my data and seeing how patients' long-term outcomes come past what they expect us to live to. So this is a very exciting thing for me personally. We hope that you will join us and embark on this new exciting chapter in our community's history. And with that, I am going to hand it over to RareX.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Danae. We're really excited to really be involved in the HCU network, working with the group over the last several months to introduce you to a RareX data collection portal so that you can actually share your many experiences with researchers. I am Mary Cobb, and I'm here with my colleagues Tom Hume and Megan O'Boyle, and we are the patient engagement and communications team, or part of it, at RareX. We come to you, we've been involved with RareX for a while, since the beginning of this really important initiative for the rare disease community. But each one of us personally have been involved as advocates for loved ones in our families. Tom Hume as a dad to a son with juvenile myositis, and he was also involved in founding Cure JM. Megan O'Boyle, who has a daughter, Shannon, with a neurodevelopmental disorder, Phelan-McDermott Syndrome Foundation. And she has quite a bit of experience in registry development and has served as a PI for their registry. And I've been an advocate for my sister with pulmonary sarcoidosis and involved in the foundation, and have also worked with NORD and with many of the patient advocacy groups. So we're here and really excited, and this is all about you and how you can basically help, share your information with researchers. So moving on to our agenda, we have, moving on to the next slide.
Sorry.
No problem. Okay, so this is just a highlight of our agenda. And what we're going to try to do is, over the course of about a half hour or so, we just want to give you some background on who our RareX is, what we're solving for, how we came to help to support the rare disease community and help you. And then Tom will move on and really go into the data collection portal, how you can access it and how you can share your information. And then we'll open it up, as Danae said, for Q&A. And I will get a little bit more into RareX, but we are a nonprofit. And as a nonprofit, we are really, really thankful and grateful for the support of many partners that we have. But one really important partner that we want to point out and give special thanks to is Travere Therapeutics, who has really helped us to support the expansion of our platform and enable the development of the homocystinuria data collection that you'll be able to participate in. So now, what is our RareX? RareX, as I said, is a nonprofit organization with a total focus on helping to accelerate rare disease research, treatments, and cures by removing barriers to data collection and sharing. And, and many of you, there's, a lot of work that is done in developing registries to do data collection, but it can be complicated, it can be expensive. And what really drove RareX to be was those challenges in helping to simplify the process. It is a platform. The whole focus is on collecting data or enabling the collection of data that you as a patient, as a parent, as a caregiver will be putting on, connecting data. And we'll get a little bit more into that, but that's connecting not only the information that you're able to put on the platform, but connecting to medical records, genetic reports, other data that might have been done in other studies, and sharing data or enabling the sharing of data and access by researchers of all types, whether they are in an academic setting with a biotech company, they basically researchers going through a third-party platform through the Broad Institute. We don't own the data. Just going back, we don't own. Actually, it's patient-owned data. We don't sell it or do research with it. We're just enabling the collection of the data, and it is powered by multiple technologies, including the Broad Institute. So moving on to the next slide, what are we solving for? This is what drove the development of RareX. In many cases, innovation in rare disease research is limited by lack of access to standardized structured patient data. Very often the data may exist, but it's captive in silos, meaning, and Megan can even speak to this later on, patient groups actually invest in or are able to develop their own registries, and they sit over there. An academic, a university may develop a registry, or a company may develop a registry to be able to support and provide the information they need to pursue and basically explore treatments. But then researchers can't get to them because they're sitting in silos. Sometimes data is not in what we call a structured, standardized format, or it can be just a lot of questions that in some cases patient groups actually get involved in developing the questions, but they're not based on validated surveys, which is our focus is on a structured format and really pulling in surveys and questions that are validated. Or in some cases, the data just doesn't exist. So in that case, it really is a barrier to researchers having even a better understanding of the disease. So this is what RareX is about, and this is what we were founded on. So moving on to the next slide, this will give you a visual, an overall graphic to kind of look at, what the portal, the platform looks like. In the middle, there's a blue bar that goes across, and that is just meant to kind of visualize that, the platform, it has a lot of surveys. It has demographic information, but it also has organ-specific type of surveys that you as a patient, a parent, a caregiver can kind of access. And this will be accessible by many, many patient groups. We already have about 12 patient groups on the portal, and now with the addition of the homocystinuria community, you will be able to then access and actually share your information. And we'll go through the process of how you'll access it, going from the many communications that are being sent out by the HCU network directly to a community page that is branded for your disease, and then they'll give you direct access. And on the bottom, the little green squares are really meant to basically portray the fact that researchers will access this in what is called a federated data access approach, so they can actually go in and do research either based on a disease, by a symptom, or they can do cross-disease research, and it provides even greater opportunity to find your data in a de-identified way. So then moving on, what I want to do is kind of touch on when you go into the portal, when you start using this data collection in November, then what you will have access to. So on the left, under the red bar, it says HCU Data Collection Initial Steps. So we will go through the process of how you'll sign on, which is actually very similar to what you do when you create accounts and you do passwords and you do a kind of second step verification. As a first step, what will be really important is that you go in, you set up an account, you go through the informed consent, you go through data sharing preferences, which is, we talk about patient-owned data. So you as a patient, as a parent or caregiver can actually specify how you want your data to be shared with what type of researchers, what type of research. There's a general info diagnosis mini survey, and then a health and development survey. So we're going to be communicating that should be one of the first steps that you do to basically set up your account. Then in the second column, it says HCU data collection surveys. So what will be listed on your dashboard, it'll be really easy to follow, are surveys that go into different topics, whether it's quality of life, different domains or different organ systems, and also in diet, in medication and supplements. So that, and they're mini surveys. In some cases, they might take 10 minutes to do, 15 minutes to do, but what we set it up in a format so that you can do it in chunks, as opposed to one of these very long surveys that are 300 questions. And what this has been organized to be able to you to share information in areas that are known to impact impact people with homocystinuria, but also there's other areas, and we may learn about what your experience is in. So that's what you will see when you can actually go into the data collection in the next month. And also we'll be adding to the platform. So in the green column is just an idea of some of the future surveys, which can also add some information about what researchers will learn about the disease. So then on the next slide, going back. So I think it's important that all of you know that one of the things about RareX is that when we work with our partners and with our patient communities is that in building our platform, we have done the difficult job of actually putting in the building blocks of data governance, having an umbrella institutional review board or IRB established to really cover all the essential governance that are important to govern policies and procedures to do this correctly. So that includes the data sharing, patient rights, informed consent. Only de-identified data is actually shared with any researcher, and also your community will be able to access some aggregate data. So we'll be able to look at how many people have participated, what are the diagnoses, so we can feed back and share that type of information in an aggregate way to your community. And when this data collection is now rolling out, it'll be available in English, and we'll be looking at doing translations down the line. But that means that any patients who can participate in English, whether they're here or HCU Network Australia, will also be participating in other other countries around the world as have access to this data collection. And then the next slide. So just in summary, this is why your community is working with us, and we're working with you. The focus is on helping to speed up research and development, provide the data that's important to researchers in a structured, standardized way, but with a focus on protecting the patient. Patient-owned data, the governance is in place. It's going to be on a federated data access platform through an academic institution, so researchers can access it. And down the line, we're working on the ability to connect to existing data sources like electronic health records, genetic reports, et cetera. So we're really excited to roll out this data collection. And now I'm going to turn it over to Tom, who's going to actually get into the nitty-gritty of how you access and get it going. And we'll be with you to support and provide the tools necessary to make it a streamlined process.
Great. Thanks, Mary. So what do you need to get started? It's actually a very, very simple process. As Mary said, it follows a multi-step authentication for the very first time you log in, like any other account that you might set up with accounts and passwords. When you get into the initial surveys, you're not going to need medical records. There are some questions that might ask around the age of a onset of a symptom or a diagnosis, but it's not going to ask for a specific date. You're not going to need a detailed family history in front of you. It doesn't take a lot of time, and what's nice about it is you can allot your time. You can come in and out of the surveys. You can, if one evening you want to work on surveys related to eyes, another survey related to skin, you kind of pick and choose your timing. And lastly, it's the whole platform operates best on Chrome or Apple Safari, so don't use Microsoft Edge or Mozilla. this is kind of a high-level view. What you'll do is you'll come in through a patient, your own websites as a patient community will have links over to RareX. And then you'll come into a community page that has been created for you, and I'll show you that in a second. That community page is actually where you start your journey, and there's actually a start button. You'll click that. You'll do a couple things where you'll have to review a privacy policy, and you'll also have to review a terms of use. Again, very similar to other kinds of accounts that you set up. You accept, move forward, and then you can begin your process in data collection. Two very important upfront surveys that are needed. One is patient consent. Nothing can happen when we get through data, nothing's being consented to. And also the data sharing preference survey, that's how you want your data to be shared. And we'll go through a little bit of that. And then you jump into all the different surveys, or also called domains. So as I mentioned, you'll come to your community page. That is the image of your community page on the right there. You might come in through your patient advocacy group website. You might get an email that has a direct link, or even social media links might all come into the community page. This is your community page. It's set up right now. The buttons are not active right now, so and that will be rolling out in November. But just so you see it, it's the community page just kind of explains what you're going to be going into with the whole data collection program. There's a whole area of Q&A and kind of the steps that are involved with that. And you can always, once you've actually logged in, you can always come back and just log in through this page too, if you already have your email and password all loaded. So to start your journey, you will click Get Started button, and that will take you to a visual of a privacy policy and terms of use. And this is just a RareX thing. This is protecting us, so you're not creating like a business with all the copyright and everything that we've done to create what we need. Basically, you scroll through that privacy policy terms of use to the bottom, and you click a check box that you agree to the terms, and then you get moving on. And when you do move on, the first place that you'll be, now you're over into in the true data collection platform. And so you'll identify what we call a persona, yourself. Are you a patient, or are you a caregiver of someone? And then you begin filling in your names. This is for the initial sign up. Once you've done that, you'll get a recognition, yes, we received that. And you'll get an email sent back to you. And the email will say it's coming from RareX, and just look for that email, and you'll click on create a password. You'll end up back over in the system to in fact do that, create a password. So you'll add your email when you click back, and then there'll be a second button, send verification code, to turn it on. You click that, and you get another email. This is the verification code. Again, the reason we do this is just obviously with any type of account or private account type of situation, we want the right kind of security. Once you take your, get that verification code, drop it in, and then you can create your password. And then once you create your password, you can get in, and you're starting. Now, the first thing you'll see is an end user licensing agreement. This is the GUI, or the user interface that is seen is supported by a company called Matrix and Across. And so you're looking at their licensing agreement here. And again, it's the same thing. It's just protecting the technology, so it's not taken away. And then you're in it. You're in it to start answering the survey. So you'll start with your consent form. Again, you'll identify, are you consenting for yourself? Are you consenting for a child? And it'll take you through a series of questions. What we've tried to do in the consent form is really write it to a sort of layman's language, not to get too technical in the language. And we even have an area where our format is more of a Q&A. So just to help make it as understandable as possible. And if you want to go deeper into the question or answer, you can just hit learn more and you'll get an expansion of that response too. As you move through consent, you'll be asked about things if you'd like to participate in additional surveys or possible other research. You'll be asked if a researcher has a clinical trial going on, if you would be interested in participating or learning about it, because this doesn't say you have to participate, it just says that you would be willing to be contacted, and that would be through RareX. And then at the end of that, you'll sign, do an electronic signature, basically just filling in your name and sign, and then that consent is done. Then you're going to move on to a survey, and this is more a little bit more demographic and a little bit more about you, from everything from where you live to how you want to be contacted to even your preferred language. As I mentioned, there's a little other demographic information. This is for our own research, but it also helps even researchers out there who might and even policymakers right now who might look at some of this de-identified data and try and put the right resources to it. So you'll see at the bottom there, it'll say rare disease. And this is actually where you would we have a drop down or drop up menu in this case. And you could actually select your disease. You can also write in your disease too, if the way it's written in the pop-up is not what you would expect. Or it's not how you feel like you've been diagnosed. And you can actually select multiples of these too if there's overlapping. Then at this point, you'll move into data sharing. And so you'll note that you are either, again, the caregiver or the person with the disease. Part of the reason why that's prompt, you'll see this prompt before several different surveys. It's just to make sure you're getting exactly the right survey, the right language. So in the data sharing interest, you'll see several options. Our strong recommendation is to check on the top one, which is general research. So this would include any sort of health, medical, biomedical research, but then it would also include possibly other kinds of research, whether it's demographic research, just looking at the whole population of anyone with HCU. So again, our recommendation, select general research, but again, you can select more narrow choices on how you want to share your data, and those are in this data sharing area. You'll also be asked if you already have, say, biological samples in a database somewhere else, and we'll ask you even to list that, because over time, we might be able to connect with those sample sites and connect it to your RareX profile. Or we are also asking too, if in the future you might be interested in collecting biosamples. So if RareX makes an agreement with a partner, then we can actually, take biosamples that can also be added to your data. Likewise, from your own electronic medical records. If down the road, if you want to link your medical records to your data in RareX, we're working on building that capability. And you can select yes or no on these. And then also too, if you have participated in other research studies already and want to connect that data, you could say yes. And you can even give some information about that study, and on the back end, RareX can reach out to those researchers, not only to make the connection of the information from that study to your data, but also to make sure that researcher is aware that RareX is a whole data set for the HCU community. And then lastly, if you'd be willing to share your contact information, which is basically email, with other or with patient advocacy groups also in the area of HCU. After that, you'll get into really now at this point you are, you've done your consent, you've done your data sharing preferences. Those are what I would say the most important things to get through, especially the very first time you log in, because again, nothing can be shared. We can't do anything with the data. Researchers can't do anything with the data until you've gotten through those pieces. And then you'll get into the general surveys, and two surveys that I recommend that you do early on, and they're pretty high level, is one survey about your diagnosis, and then the other survey is about just general health and development. And these will be very yes/no questions. Have there been cognitive issues? Yes, no. Have there been dermatological issues? Yes, no. But what they do is what we call this sort of a first level. And when Mary showed that slide that had sort of the first column of different surveys, that kind of sets up a lot many other deeper surveys that will be presented to you over time. So this is some examples of the health and development surveys. Have you had issues with brain or nervous system? It's either yes, no, or unsure. And have there been growth issues? Yes, no, unsure. And again, this is a very high level, but many more detailed surveys will be behind all this, especially if you check yes for these. So then here's an example of drilling down deeper then. So here's a very level 2 specific survey around eyes and vision. And so the questions will be things like, have there been eye movement issues, or is there visual impairment? And say if I answer yes for visual impairment, then they'll get an additional question of, well, when did the symptom first appear, what age, and what was the age of diagnosis for that? So so as you can see, this is, again, just one survey, eye and vision, but it does go deeper, and there's many other surveys behind that. Once you actually complete the survey, you get back to your dashboard, and this dashboard also will show you what you've already completed, and then it'll show you what is still new or in progress. So if you've not completed one, but you've saved it, that's great. You can come back to it anytime. Even if you've completed a survey, you can go back and view it and edit it too. So this will you'll always get a sense of your progress along the way in answering all surveys. The dashboard also kind of highlights, you get a sense of the time that's going to be involved in each particular survey. You'll see the number of questions that are part of that survey and an approximation of how long it would take to get through that particular survey. Again, the more the better, and getting your data in, because doing surveys, you might not think, well, I didn't really have any particular digestive system issues, but as you get into the surveys, a question might prompt something that you didn't really think about, or even tie it to your condition or the patient's condition. So that's why we have a wide variety of surveys over many systems of the body. And that's really it for the journey itself as far as getting into the system. And once you are in the system, if you have questions, there's some support email addresses you can use, and even support phone numbers you can use if you have questions. Mary, I'll hand it back to you.
Well, thank you, Tom. Please, if anybody has any questions, we're here to support you and help you, find your journey through the portal as easy as possible. But mostly, what's so important is, thinking about why you should participate. Think about the more that you can share, the greater understanding there can be of the condition that you're experiencing or being experienced by a child or another loved one, by going back in and actually updating the surveys that you've done. If you have any change in symptoms, et cetera, we can take a look at, your experience over time, and also look at within your community how, your experience compares to others, and there's learning from that. Also, the differences in the diagnostic challenges that are taking place in this type of a condition, in some cases where newborn screening has or hasn't been done, looking at how that's impact on the effects. So we're really looking at, the diagnosis information is really important. We talk about in bullet 3, more eyes on the data. So researchers want data. The more they can understand about a disease and learn about the experience, clearly that is really helpful in terms of the research for treatments, et cetera, that are being done. So I think we've kind of touched on these. So it's new to just think about, where this fits in and set aside the time, because it will help to, create a greater understanding of, your experience and help further the research that's really important to you and to others who are experiencing this condition. So I think with that, I'll turn that over to Danae, or we'd really be happy to go into some Q&A at this point.
Yeah, so we do have a few, I'm going to encourage everyone, if you do have questions, we did turn off the chat feature, so please submit them through the Q&A. And we do have a few questions here. I'm going to click answer this live. It says, how many people are signed up for this through RareX? So obviously we haven't launched the Homocystinurias Data Collection Program yet, but can you give a little bit of background maybe on how many other conditions you do cover and how that feeds into the system?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit to that. So as Mary said, there, beginning this past summer, we launched about 12 different disease groups, and that's even more patient advocate communities, because for some of these diseases, there were several different patient advocate groups that were participating. Fully enrolled right now, we have over 400 patients. And in the rare disease space, those numbers actually are pretty big. Those are pretty important. And what's also important is it's 400 out of several different conditions. And Megan can speak to this very well, but a lot of recommendations are, or a lot of belief there's a lot of overlap in rare disease, and what might become a treatment or a solution for one rare disease will actually help other ones too. And that's why the platform is set up the way it is. So it's not just a researcher going in and looking for a particular disease, but they might be looking at, again, issues around eyes, and then suddenly find links that other rare diseases have the same kind of issues.
And I'm just going to add, being homocystinuria, that is an umbrella of multiple conditions, really. This kind of platform really lends itself well to our community, because then some of those conditions under homocystinuria that are tied to methylmalonic acidemia, for instance, then also fall into a larger category of the organic acidemias. So when you start looking outwards, you find a lot more commonalities, and that lends itself well to understanding disease progression better, and also the development of the research, and also possible future treatments and maybe one day cure. So having that ability to all be in there together helps everyone, really. It's a huge benefit to everyone.
And I just want to highlight that if you have a symptom that you think is absolutely not connected to homocystinuria, you still should answer the questions. We are collecting data on the whole body, no matter what the cause of it is. So if it's something inherited, something that's been developed, because maybe there will be a clinical trial for that symptom that you would qualify for that's not HCU related. But there's also a chance that there are things that may not be seen as HCU related, that as we get more and more data, there'll be patterns. So don't hesitate to answer something regardless of where it came from.
I think that's a really good point, because I know as an adult patient, we all have these questions, because we are some of the older patients in our community, and we're like, is that a homocystinuria thing? And so we all speak amongst each other, and this is where we'll maybe finally get some answers. And so this is one of the really big things that excites me, is it can start to answer some of those unanswered questions that we do have. We do have another question in here. It says, where do your questions come from? It says, I would imagine as new findings come along, new questions sorry, I'm not reading very well today. Who, where do your questions come from? I would imagine as new findings come along, new questions would be valuable. Is there a team of doctors, or does the data drive the need for the new questions?
So we have a standards team, and one of the reasons we don't have all the surveys or domains out is because we're taking them on, and there's a lot of existing surveys or instruments that may exist in a certain domain, for instance, vision or hearing. And some are great and some are okay. Some are used a lot because they're free or because they're easy. So our standards team will landscape all the existing surveys. A lot of them are geared toward clinicians, and along with key opinion leaders in that domain, so clinicians and researchers, as well as industry partners that are working in that domain, there will then be a choice of which survey to use. There will also be quality assessment, down the road of the data from that survey to see if it is in fact collecting what it intended to collect. So there will be an ongoing process of evaluation after we launch surveys. And to answer the question that follows that, as you say yes to a question, let me back up. As we come out with a new survey, if it's something that related to something that you said yes to in the general question, let's say, in March, we come out with a new survey, you would get an email. And if you missed the email and you decide to log in, you would see it added to your dashboard. So it's not a one-time thing. You got to answer it in 30 days and it's going to disappear. It will always be there. And to that point, you will be reminded that you have to update at least once a year so that you can see the progression of the disease. And even if you've had no changes, because no changes is in fact information for research. You don't have to go back and answer every single question, because then you wouldn't come back. You only change the answers to questions that have changed. So if a symptom has gone away or a new symptom has developed. So researchers will see your history of answers over time. So they will see that how, and that's truly what a natural history is the progression of disease over time. So you will get reminders about updating. But if you want, if something comes up and you want to update, 3 months after your original survey, that's fine too. You can go in anytime you want, after you've seen your specialist or you've had your physical or whatever. So I just want to emphasize that that updating is really important.
Thank you. And I know that we'll get prompts too from, as an organization, the organizations, I should say, will be also putting social media posts out to help remind families to update surveys, and we'll probably be focusing on one of the domains each month just to really help remind you to do things, because we know not everyone's going to have time to do every single survey at once. Most of us wish we could only have time like that. And then there's one last question here, and if anyone else has additional questions, please feel free to enter them. Of the 400 people already signed up for the 12 conditions, do you have an early survey stats, i.e. N number or N% of signups have been from patients versus caregivers, newborn screening was involved in that kind of data?
Yeah, so we have some of that. Yes, absolutely. And what down the road, we'll have more of a dashboard that will have some aggregate data that can be given back to the organization too. But even like the early ones, like patients versus caregivers, we know that data, there's a little bit of probably a bias in the first 12 groups, because a lot of them are caregivers because of the particular neurological conditions. So some of that will create that bias, but absolutely, we've got a range of, I can tell you already, it's interesting because one stat that kind of surprised me a little bit is almost half of the currently enrolled patients are from rest of world, outside of the United States. So even though it's an English only language right now on the surveys, and our goal is to do translation down the road when we get the right and the proper governance in place to do that. But I mean, it's a huge variety of countries of patients that have learned about this and want to contribute data, which is great because it also, for researchers too, because it's much more diversity of the data than simply coming out of North America.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that, is definitely an appealing thing too, is that, natural history study sites typically are only at maybe one location, 4 locations, but not everyone lives close to those sites, especially if they live outside of the US. And so this really gives that opportunity for everyone who can read and write English to be able to participate, which I think is really important for especially those who are in underrepresented countries where, they might not even have a specialist. And so getting their voices recognized in the data and research is also really critical.
And Danae, to that point, you can use this data to inform your medical team. You can download your information. We're hoping at some point there might even be a way that you can give access to your physician, not to put in data necessarily, but to see your data. But you could definitely print something out. This is helpful when you're going to a new specialist or you're changing doctors, or you just want to inform somebody. So that's important. And also, researchers aren't in just one country, and clinical trials aren't happening just in one country. So the researchers will be accessing this data from all around the world, and the recruitment for trials could be happening in countries outside of North America that will notify people that meet the criteria. So it's all very exciting in terms of the increase in the amount of people that may have access to your data, researchers that have never heard of HCU, but when they query the data, they stumble across this rare disease. And in fact, not only will they learn about it, but they may decide to become interested in it, which is very exciting.
We do have another question here. Can you share some examples of research organizations who have or who are planning to use this data? I'll just tell the audience from our perspective as a patient organization. I know we're not necessarily a research organization, but we definitely are interested in the data that our community is sharing, not just HCU Network America, but HCU Network Australia. This data previously had been really hard to collect. Some of the people in attendance of this webinar may remember a few years back, HCU Network Australia put together really a quality of life survey, and it circulated for almost 2 years. And really, but we captured about patient data from about, I think it was around 150 patients. And so, this really makes it a lot easier, I think, to access, because a lot of that was through email distribution and through social media. But that data is very important for us because as a patient organizations together, we do put out expressions of interest for research, and it helps us understand where we should be focusing our attention on the community. We don't want to be way off kilter with where we're putting those expression of interest. I mean, most of us want better therapies and better newborn screening, but maybe there's other areas that we should be paying attention to. And so we will be using this data ourselves to help, make sure that our patients' needs are being met, along with our caregivers as well. And also helps us put together educational resources. We've put together quite a few based upon, what we already know about our community, but we're always looking for more information, feedback, and data to help, guide those things. And then we take those in to turn with our medical advisory team as well when we're developing them. But there might be larger groups that RareX is aware of. Are you guys aware of any specific research organizations, bodies that that might have specific interests in general with the RareX platform?
There's currently, this platform is being used by a lot of other research projects around the world. And so there's many, many researchers that are already, have already given their credentials, logged in, gotten an account, and can query across different collections. So there are the existing researchers that are already using this platform with other data collections, and then they'll be made aware of the RareX collection. We will also be driving researchers, once there's enough data in the database, driving researchers to go in and check it out. You, of course, will inform your own researchers. But as I said, we want researchers that may have never heard of these diseases to go in there and see what's there. But it's important that we have enough data in there to be statistically of interest before we, guide people there. We don't want them to get there and see empty shelves instead of full surveys. So that's why we're going to push for you all to try and get in there and get as much entered as soon as possible. In terms of researchers include researchers from academia and medical centers. So NIH and, in CERN from, I think that's France. There's, endless numbers of universities that do academic research that may then lead to the development of devices and medications. There's also researchers at medical centers, and there are researchers at industry, at biopharma, so small biotechs and large pharmaceutical companies. So they will all have access to free data, de-identified data. So there was another question about whether patients or family members could access the data. And there is a term called citizen scientists, and they can go in and set up an account. And there is, I haven't done it yet, but there is it's a library card of sorts that they would have to get through the system. But I think more exciting than having to go in and access lots and lots of data and not really knowing statistically what you necessarily want to do with it is that this foundation will be getting aggregate data, so summary data on a regular basis and sharing it with you. So, what is the, what age group are the patients that have these symptoms, or what country, how many people are in a certain country, or what was the age of onset of certain symptoms. Again, that information is going to be only as good as the number of people that have gone in and entered it. So encourage your fellow families to try and set aside some time. It's always good to have a little carrot or a little reward, like as soon as I get registered and answer the first 2 surveys, I, get to have my chocolate bar. But it's really not onerous. And I think just in the activity of answering the questions, you may start realizing that you have symptoms that you hadn't really thought about, or that there's things that you should be looking out for that may not be just something that you kind of notice, that in fact, it might be something that you should, take notice of.
Yeah. Okay. I had something and then I forgot what I was going to say, but that's okay. We do have a question, and I think this is actually a really good question considering RareX is about rare. And, when you're thinking about these communities, and some of our conditions within homocystinuria are very rare. Like there's only 5 documented cases in the literature. So when you talk about statistically significant data, it's a little bit hard for us to sometimes wrap our head around that when some of our numbers are so incredibly small. What does RareX classify as statistically significant, a little tongue twister there, statistically significant to make that next step to, pull in the research world?
That's a good question. I mean, we're not all researchers, so it's possible that a researcher could be using very small numbers. There's certainly cases, and we know of it through other partner organizations, where literally an N of 1 type, N of 1 being the only person that might have that diagnosis in the world, can actually get down to treatments. There's a whole realm of precision medicine that's bringing about those kind of, especially in genetic conditions, possibilities. So I don't think there's a hard and fast answer of the number. We are strongly encouraging, though, any groups that we're bringing onto the platform to, at a minimum, get to half of their community on board. And that would probably give numbers at that point where a researcher might be interested or more interested. It's data, the more the better. And as a group, the more you as a community can all contribute, the more value there will be. So I hope that helps. But again, I don't think there's a hard and fast answer, because we do know of very, very rare conditions that actually are into the stage of having treatments. So,
and I think the other thing that's important too is, this data, just because there's maybe 5 conditions now, there's one gentleman in the rare disease community that when he founded his the organization in honor of his daughter, there was only 7 patients identified, and now they're over, I think, over 70. And so, just because we only have a few documented in the literature doesn't mean there aren't more out there. And so, being able to share even for those small numbers helps us better understand the condition and its progression and what's working, what's not working. And so, it doesn't matter if it's 1 patient really contributing or 100 patients, it's all significant. But I do understand, that I want to be able to draw people into. But I think, as a whole data set for the homocystinuria community, all our information together is much stronger if we're all participating. All right.
Janae, I want to, when Megan answered the question before about what groups might be interested in taking a look at this data, and she spoke about a lot of different researchers and the fact that there are already researchers accessing this platform. But please also, everybody, keep in mind that industry, and in particular, since you know that Travere is very, very interested in this information and interested in, they're already, doing quite a bit of research and beginning a clinical trial already, doing additional work. So, the more information and understanding of the condition that, that this is really important to them. And, it exists, clearly the data collection is one thing which will really help to populate and understand how the condition is impacting on your lives. But it will also help to inform those many researchers who are involved in, developing and monitoring and working on that clinical trial, which will, is going to be publicized, if not now, pretty soon. So, keep that in mind, and that will help other researchers in the area too, who are really interested in developing treatments, for HCU.
Yes, I think that's a really good, important point too, is that, there are companies already interested in this, being for them to access this information and help them make better informed decisions about entering clinical trials that they currently have going on will only benefit our community better, because we want to make sure that they are on point with where our needs really are. And that's invaluable, really.
And I just want to emphasize, as a parent of a rare child who does not have industry very interested, there's over 9,000 rare diseases. And it is a huge bonus that at this stage you all have any industry people interested, and the more data that they can see and the better characterization they can get of the condition, the better the understanding of what they should be developing. Just because something has a symptom doesn't mean that that's the symptom that means the most to your community. From a quality of life standpoint, you all can be driving where the interest is by, it's your voice. This data collection is a megaphone for your own situation. And the more people you can get on, the louder it's going to be. Mm-hmm. So
to echo that point, there was actually a comment here that says statistical significance is increased as survey answer surveyors answer more questions, actually. So filling out as much information as possible reduces the chance of insignificance, which I think is an incredible point. And I couldn't have said that really better myself. I was trying to allude to that, but it's like, that's right on. That's exactly it. So with all of our feedback is. So, well, we're just about at an hour. If anyone has any questions, we can answer them really quick, but I think we're about at the point where we need to wrap it up otherwise. And so, well, that's seeing if anything else populates here, but I just want to thank the RareX team for all that they've done to help make this a possibility and for our community. And we really look forward to this opportunity. I know I have long awaited the day where I can enter and have all these experiences actually amount to something more than just me verbally sharing, but, you know, being able to help drive science and research. So we thank you guys so much for this incredible platform and for what's to come of it. And we hope that all of those who are attending and will listen in later will also join us. All right, I think we are good.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Have a great weekend.